Today, I'm joined by Leanne, a trauma, healing, and addiction recovery specialist who has spent over a decade helping others break free from addiction, anxiety, and the limiting beliefs that hold us back. Leanne, we're so happy to have you on Trauma Undone.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I'm looking forward to connecting and speaking with you today.
So, Leanne, you experienced such trauma as a child. How did you heal from that and get to where you are today?
Well, it was a journey. It took years. But I started learning a lot about myself. I was practicing self-awareness and learning the power of the mind, which really was a big life changer for me because I felt the trauma kind of left me in negative thought process, and that was a big starting point for me. And of course, practicing forgiveness and acceptance for everything that happened and using it to rebuild myself and empower my future.
That's amazing. So, just for the listeners who don't know, can you just give a little background as to what happened to you as a child and how that affected your life as you were growing up?
Yes, so growing up, so I was born in Ukraine, and to parents who are amazing, but didn't really know how to behave properly, or didn't learn to. So my father had an issue with alcohol, and when he drank, he became different and scary, and that planted an impact on my nervous system. It affects a child and their response and their fears. So it definitely planted an imprint, a seed. And then from then on, I felt just very sensitive as a young child. I was afraid of a lot of things, and my mother, who lived in fear, she always kind of shut me down and told me that, why are you shy? Like, what's wrong with you? So it wasn't because I was shy. I realized it later. It was because I was very sensitive, and it was too overwhelming for me as a child to be around other people. So those are the things that started the effects, and so growing up, I just always felt, out of place. I didn't feel a sense of belonging. I, kind of grew up. My parents were always busy. I was kind of a latchkey kid. Um, just walked to school by myself, and just that trauma left me feeling different and disconnected from, you know, normal people or the world. So that's, how I felt as a child for a very long time until through my teenage years. Um, and, until later when I realized that I just needed to do something different. I needed to heal. I needed to understand. And so that's when I started looking and searching for ways to find a way to just feel better.
Yeah. And so you use hypnotherapy um in your practice when you're working with people. So how does that hypnotherapy work in changing the limiting beliefs in our subconscious?
Well, it works amazingly. It's kind of magical, and it's really hard to put into words. Um, the many times that I experienced it with my hypnotherapist and the years of hypnotherapy that I've done with people, it's a profound feeling of inner peace where we're where we're entering our subconscious mind, but in a very smooth and gentle way. What I work on is quieting the mind before we can enter the heart, because we can't enter the heart until we quiet the mind. So that's the idea. So when we enter the heart, we can do the healing work, and we can replace the limiting beliefs like, nothing good ever happens to me, or nothing good ever sticks around, into how the person wants to view or how the person wants to think instead. Like, things didn't happen before that were good for me, but now things are flowing really well. It's just a reframe. And so when we plant it into the subconscious mind, it takes root and it begins to grow. And a person just naturally begins to think that way and feel that way. And so it's like, we're giving birth to a new thought and new belief about yourself.
So when you're changing the belief and the thought that you have about yourself or about whatever it is that the hypnosis is changing, are you healing the root of the trauma that led to that belief? And if so, how does that work?
Yes, absolutely. We have to get to the root, like when that seed was planted, like I was sharing about how that seed was planted for me, that fear, that terror, that, shame and guilt. So yes, so we go directly into that seed, or that first time the child or the person felt the the fear or the emotion of whatever they're working on. And absolutely, and there's something that's called the therapeutic imagery that I guide them through, and it's inner child healing work where we recognize the child that was hurt, and then we embrace. And it's kind of I guide in the moment
Okay.
for whatever the individual needs.
So it's not just replacing one thought with another, because I've heard I have a dear friend who's a hypnotist. He specializes
Yes.
in a very different area. He specializes in heartbreak. And he talks about just replacing just replacing the thought. So you are actually, transforming and transmuting the original trauma. Is that correct?
Yes, at the root. Yes, at the root. Because what you're describing is something just very specific to a specific feeling, thought.
Okay.
But I like to work at the root. So when we work at the root, everything else kind of seems to heal on its own. It's really fascinating, you know, because that part of you that was hurt, that felt betrayed, abandoned, scared, is no longer feeling like that. Therefore, because it spreads to other parts of you, and the healing starts to happen in areas in your life that you're like, oh my God, how did that change for me? So that's where I go. I go to the root.
And how do you get to the root? Like, if someone comes to you and they know they had a specific incident happen in their childhood, um, and they want to heal that. But someone comes to you to say, my life's just not working anymore. Like, there's so much stuff that I just feel like I've hit a brick wall, or and I don't have memories of my childhood. How do you actually get down to that root to heal that original trauma?
Yes, through questions. So,
Okay.
so we're talking during the process. It's therapeutic, and sometimes people don't even realize how deep they can get until we get there. So it's more about going through the layers of, okay, how did that feel? What were you thinking at that time? It's kind of, we're discovering through different layers to get all the way to the root. So there's a back and forth conversation that I guide them through to understand. So I can give you an example of what
That'll be awesome.
Yeah, so I had a client who came in with her husband because she thought that he made her feel like she's a burden. And he said, that's not even close. I don't think that. I don't feel that. I love you. But she felt like she's constantly a burden, that he's feels like he's better than her. And then she came into hypnotherapy with me individually, and we did we did the work, and we went all the way in, and I'm not going to tell you like all the details, but I'll tell you what happened. You know, she was led to remembering a experience when when she was young with her mother. Her mother was having a really hard time accepting that, she had children now, and she was always complaining that, you ruined my life. She was telling the children that, and, you know, all of them felt like they were a burden to her. So, and she even said, I feel like I'm a burden to my mom, that I'm taking away her life. So it came from that idea and that feeling of feeling like a burden, like you're asking for stuff and people are just not, that came from that long ago. So when she realized that, I then led her to a healing of forgiveness to her mom. And then she's like, wow, I'm not angry anymore. I feel compassion. I feel a sense of compassion for what my mother was going through. And so that helped her to step into her confidence, because we now eliminated, because that was a belief that she created, that she's a burden. And then it transferred to her relationship with her husband. So once we cleared that, they were in a beautiful relationship. She was like, I can't believe I carried that with me. So that's how some of the process works.
That's so fascinating to me because I know, like, even from my own experience, I don't know, like, I don't have memories from my childhood. So to know that it's possible to, like, break free from something when you don't even know that it's there, using your
Right.
method is amazing. Um, so you mentioned the inner child. Do you do a lot of work with the inner child?
I do. I do. I feel that's the focus, because we have to like do it the right way.
So when you do inner child work, are there many different children or personas that you've left in your life as you've had trauma happen? So you have your inner child was the original trauma that hasn't been able to fully integrate. Do you have other bits of you that are not fully integrated as you grow up and as you experience more trauma?
Sure. Yeah. Are you asking for me personally or just in general?
Yeah, like from your perspective and your opinion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I had to heal every aspect of my child self. So the scared self, the insecure self, the self that had doubt and these limiting beliefs. And once we heal all that, the adult self begins to feel whole and peace. Is that what you're asking? I'm
Yeah.
not sure if I'm
No, no,
answering the
that
question.
that is it. So there's multiple different facets of your inner child that you do need to heal.
That's right. That's right. Sometimes, it's the scared child, the one that was frightened all the time, that had to walk on eggshells when the parent came in. So that's one spirit that was that was planted into the child. So we have to heal that. you know sometimes that part can heal other parts, but then the child, we go to a different age in the child, in the person. So like, for example, if we start from 2-year old, they go back all the way to 2 years old, and then the next time they're like, oh, now I'm like a 4-year old and I'm feeling resistant because my mother is asking me to do something. and I just don't wanna do it because she's screaming at me, you know? So, we kinda have to hit that part and heal that part as well, and so that the child matures emotionally. So we get a learning from it. It's not that, we're here to blame the things that happen. We're here to embrace and have gratitude for our life experience so that we can recognize what we can change and how we can be different moving forward.
So, do you find that there is always a trauma that happened in someone's childhood that has led them to experience things in their adulthood?
It depends how deep they're feeling about the situation as an adult. I can tell when somebody has this trauma since they were very young, and I could tell when it's new, when it's fresh, you know? So for example, I'll give you another example. I have a client who is struggling with heartbreak, and she's really struggling with feeling unwanted. All her insecurities are coming up, and she's just feeling so upset and hurt, you know, of not having this relationship anymore. So when we started working together, her relationship was with her father started, you know, w- she had a father who then didn't have a relationship with her since she was 2 years old and never wanted to rekindle that relationship. So her whole life, she was feeling unvalued, she was feeling unwanted by the first man of her life. Her first relationship was with her father. So those are the same feelings that she's having in an adult relationship heartbreak. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. That does make sense.
Yeah.
So, Leanne, what was like the breaking point for you when you started to heal and realize that what had happened to you as a child was not normal and not okay?
Yeah, I didn't realize that until later. I just was struggling so much with feeling isolated and so much shame about how things were. And I realized that probably after I had my first child, my son, I had my son at 21 years old. And like I had to figure out like what kind of parent I wanted to be, and I still had so much resentment with my parents, and I kept blaming for who I am because of them and what they taught me until I came to a point where I realized and I learned that I have to take responsibility now for my feelings. It's yes, they had a part, they had something to do with it, but these are now my feelings of insecurity, of fear, of anger, of, feeling not worthy. Now I have to work on it myself. So once I started taking responsibility for my own feelings and emotions and didn't look for blaming other people and instead said, I don't like this about myself. I don't like this and I want to change that. And it wasn't easy to do because, I feel it wasn't easy at the time because I didn't know how to do it.
Yeah.
I didn't have the guidance, and then I started seeking guidance. And then I understood, okay, this is the way, to do it. And so um hypnotherapy was, a big breakthrough for me. This was 15 years ago or 16 years ago now when I first attended hypnotherapy school, and I honestly I thought it was a joke. And but because I was practicing law of attraction at the time, it says things will come to into your experience. You might not even think it's for you, but you got to just go kind of try it and go through it. And so that's what I did, and it was the thing that I needed in my life. It was so transformational that I even forgot that I was in school, like, to become a hypnotherapist, I was in therapy myself, so that taught me a lot. And, I learned about my self-control. I learned about healing, and I went through the healing process, and, like, that school was like it was life-changing. And so, yeah, and, it just brought a lot of, awareness and understanding, and, ability to, um, be able to help myself, which was big for me because, when we grow up in that type of, environment, we have a lot of trust issues. So it was really hard for me to trust someone to help me. So I felt like I needed to figure things out on my own and do everything on my own. But then that changed. That changed for me. But the biggest piece that was life changing was, um, learning and practicing forgiveness and letting go of, um, the resentment that I felt toward the people that made me feel a certain way. And that's when the journey started to feel better for me because I wasn't holding on. I was only dependent on myself now. I wasn't depending on other people to save me.
So, how do you get to that place of forgiveness? That's a huge one. So, yeah, how did you get there? And how do you recommend people start the process?
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, and you're right. It's very hard, to forgive. Um, but you're really healing yourself. So I think the awareness was, I didn't I for me, it was about I needed to figure it out on my own, and getting to that place where I started reading a lot of books on forgiveness and trying to understand why it's important for me to forgive is, to let go of this stone, of this rock that's sitting in my heart and preventing me from doing the things that I'm meant to do here in this world. And so, facing it and really finding the love in my heart was healing, right? When we can find the love and compassion for another person, that especially people that hurt us, we're no longer carrying that, heavy baggage on our back because we've let that go. And I believe that forgiveness is the first step, but then there's compassion and understanding for, what my parents went through and how they were molded and why they did the things that they did. And so practicing the compassion piece was actually easier to move into forgiveness.
So for people who are feeling like really inspired by your journey and the work that you do, what would be the first thing that you recommend that they do now to really either start their healing or to deepen their healing?
Yeah, I think like having a conversation with yourself and just asking yourself like where do I want to be? Like what kind of person do I want to be? And being honest with yourself. And I believe that honesty is very important in our healing journey because, if we don't accept and take accountability for our behavior, then we can't change. So I think the first step is to ask yourself, like, what do I need? What can I change within myself to be better for me? And if people have children, it's always a good motivator. I know that my children definitely helped me change a lot of the things about myself. They pushed me to that because I wanted to be better for them. I wanted to teach them better. I wanted them to experience, you know, the opposite of what I experienced. Yeah, but I think just having a honest conversation with yourself and being honest with the character traits that you don't like about yourself. I'm angry, I'm jealous, I am, insecure. Those are all hard truths, but we all carry some of them, and we're trying to avoid them by not facing them. So once we face them, then we're in motion to start healing. It's just like a person, I'm an addiction recovery specialist, and I work with people who struggle with substance abuse. So they have to come to terms with, I don't like the way I'm doing things. I can't do this anymore. It's kind of like accepting I need the change.
It's very hard to look at those negative feelings or look at the parts of yourself that you don't like. How do you do that? Like, what would you recommend someone do? Because sometimes it's so scary to even just to think the thought that there's a part of you don't like, that people avoid it.
Yeah, of course. And it's really tough, and I know that. But I think for me, what was tough about it is I didn't know how to change that. And so I was always searching for, okay, I understand I don't like this about myself. Here's the self-help books, but they're not really teaching me like how, to do that. So when we don't know how, we're afraid to take the step. So the thing to do is to recognize, okay, I don't like this about myself. And you don't have to go telling anybody. You can just, it's between you and you. Um, I don't like this about myself. What do I need to do to change that? And honestly, every human being knows what they need to do to make the appropriate change. So we have to reprogram our behavior and our response when we feel that certain way. So if I'm struggling with anger, then I have to replay that and ask myself, how do I want to respond instead? Well, I want to be able to respond with compassion, with calm, with kindness to myself and respect the other person. So we have to program and actually create a plan of how we're going to do it differently moving forward, and then practice it in the moment when it happens.
That's hard. It's challenging to do
So
that.
that's the tool. But the acceptance part, like, it's very challenging because, you know, um, a lot of things are going to change in your life, and your subconscious programming, your conditioned experience is not comfortable with that. So it feels like a threat. It feels scary. But then there's the part of you that wants to change. There's a part of you that's like, you know what? It's terrible the way that I behave, you know? Um, and I believe that's the first step. People have to take responsibility for their actions. And I'm very like, direct with that. Like, if you're not willing to accept that this is what you want to change about, or you're aware that you don't like this about yourself, then there's nothing really you can do at that point.
Mm.
You know, I came to a point where I was tired of blaming others because nothing was changing in my life. So I'm like, I have to do, it's my feelings, it's my stuff.
That's brave and that's wonderful. Um, and so, Leanne, for people who want to work with you, where can they find you?
On my website, it's just Liana. It's actually lianalapidus.com. And I have a contact form. We can set up a time to chat, and I'd love to answer any questions or what in any way people can contact me through there.
That's great. Thank you. Leanna, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your story and your truth and the wonderful work that you're doing today on Trauma Undone.
Thank you. Thank you. It was my pleasure.